Austin, Texas, where music fills the air and creativity flows as freely as the Colorado River. Nestled deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Austin is a city unlike any others. Its lively streets are a tapestry of culture, sound, and individuality. Known as the live music capital of the world, Austin's energy comes alive at night, when its numerous bars, clubs, and outdoor stages pulse with the beat of local and international artists alike. From the renowned South by Southwest festival, which brings together music, film, and tech innovators, to the iconic Austin city limits, the city is a playground for dreamers, artists, and musicians alike. But beyond the glitz of its performances and festivals, Austin also holds a charm that is quieter, more personal. The city's laid-back lifestyle draws people from all over, offering an escape from the fast-paced hustle of larger metropolises. Austin has been hailed as a city of reinvention, a place where one can find themselves or start anew. It's a place where nature meets urban sprawl, where the Texas hill country provides a serene backdrop to the bustling cityscape. Lady Bird Lake glistens beneath the hot Texas sun, offering a respite for joggers, kayakers, and those simply wanting to watch the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink. Austin's famous slogan, "Keep Austin Weird," reflects its eccentric soul. The streets are alive with a sense of creative rebellion, with mural-lined alleys, quirky art installations, and a hole-in-the-wall cafes serving up craft coffee alongside spoken-word poetry. The city embraces those who are different, who are searching for something more, whether that be through art, music, or simply the freedom to express who they truly are. For many, Austin is not just a city, but an identity. It's a place where individuality is celebrated, where you can reinvent yourself among a community of free thinkers. But like any city, beneath the surface of Austin's vibrant culture lies a darkness. For all its celebration of creativity and expression, Austin is not immune to the complex, often hidden struggles that haunt its residents. The same streets that echo with music at night hold secrets during the day, secrets of loneliness, betrayal, and desires that cannot be spoken aloud. It's easy to get lost in Austin, not just its sprawling neighborhoods, but within oneself. Many come to the city seeking freedom, but for some, freedom comes with a cost. Austin's allure as a haven for reinvention and self-expression has also attracted those who seek to escape their past or their true selves. The anonymity of city life, paired with its progressive and open-minded reputation, makes it a perfect backdrop for those who want to hide their inner struggles. For some, this leads to self-discovery and growth, but for others, the pressures of living up to an idealized version of oneself can lead to emotional turmoil. Turmoil that often remains unseen, simmering beneath the surface. In 2015, Austin's carefully cultivated image of a free-spirited, creative haven would be shattered by a crime so shocking it left the city reeling. Behind closed doors, away from the lights of downtown and the music that fills its streets, an unspeakable act of violence took place. This was no random act, no fleeting moment of madness. It was the result of a friendship that had unraveled, tangled in a web of repressed desires, jealousy, and unreciprocated love. At first glance, the friendship between Craig Kingsley and Daniel Spencer seemed like one of mutual respect and admiration. Two men brought together by their shared love of art and expression. But as with many relationships, there were things left unsaid, hidden beneath layers of politeness and camaraderie. Theirs was a bond that, over time, became something much more complicated. In a city known for embracing individuality and creative exploration, Craig's growing feelings for Daniel, feelings that were never returned, would ultimately set the stage for a tragedy no one saw coming. As the lights of Austin's bars flickered on that warm summer evening in 2015, and the city's artists, musicians, and revelers came alive, something much darker was brewing in the background. Beneath the laughter and excitement, behind the closed doors of a quiet Austin neighborhood, a tension that had been building for months was about to reach its breaking point. What happened that night was not just a moment of uncontrolled rage, nor was it an act of passion. It was the culmination of months, possibly years, of suppressed emotions, unspoken truths, and an obsession that had slowly taken over. In a city that prides itself on freedom of expression, Craig found himself trapped by his own feelings and by a friendship that could never be what he wanted it to be. The quiet neighborhoods of Austin, where the sounds of guitars and street performers typically fill the air, would soon become the setting for a crime that no one could have predicted. A crime that would lay bare the dangers of hidden desires and the devastating consequences that can come when obsession turns deadly. This is the story of Craig Kingsley and Daniel Spencer, a story of friendship, love, and betrayal, all set against the backdrop of a city that celebrates expression, but where some things remain too dangerous to express. As we delve deeper into the events of that fateful night, we'll uncover a complex web of emotions that ultimately led to murder. What drove these two men, friends by all accounts, down such a dark and irreversible path? How did a friendship built on admiration and respect become something so twisted that it ended in bloodshed? Stay with us as we unravel the mystery behind this chilling case and reveal the dark truths hidden beneath the bright lights of Austin, Texas. Craig Kingsley was the kind of man who seemed to have life figured out, at least on the surface. In a city like Austin, where creatives flocked to make their mark, Craig stood out. He was an aspiring screenwriter, living in a place that was quickly becoming a haven for indie filmmakers and writers. The art scene in Austin was booming, with South by Southwest and other festivals drawing attention to the city's growing film industry. Craig knew this was his chance to make it big, and his ambition was clear to everyone who knew him. He was charming, outgoing, and had a natural magnetism. Wherever Craig went, people were drawn to him. At parties, he was always at the center of the room, laughing, telling stories, and cracking jokes. His wit and easygoing nature made him someone people wanted to be around. Craig had a way of making others feel important. He connected with people on a deep level, and they admired him for it. His friends often commented on his ability to make every conversation feel personal, as if nothing else mattered in that moment but the person he was talking to. But beneath Craig's outward charm and easy confidence was a man wrestling with deeper internal struggles. While he was quick to put on a happy face for those around him, Craig's personal life was more complicated than anyone realized. His charm masked a loneliness, a constant feeling of not being enough. As someone who worked in the highly competitive world of screenwriting, Craig faced constant rejection, and though he put on a brave face, the rejections took their toll on him. Each rejection chipped away at his self-esteem, and behind closed doors, Craig was not as confident as he appeared. There was also something else, something much harder to define. Craig harbored feelings he couldn't fully express or understand. He had always struggled with his sexual identity, keeping those feelings buried deep inside. In his younger years, he had tried to fit the mold society expected of him, but as he grew older, it became harder to ignore his true desires. Still, Craig wasn't ready to confront those feelings, let alone share them with the world. He kept them hidden, convincing himself that he could keep it all together and that he could continue living the life everyone expected of him. Then there was Daniel Spencer. Daniel was everything Craig was not. At 32, Daniel was a well-known figure in Austin's local music scene. While Craig craved the spotlight and attention, Daniel preferred to stay in the background. He was introverted, quiet, and deeply private, a man who let his music speak for him. Daniel had spent years writing songs and performing at small gigs around Austin. Though he wasn't looking for fame, his talent had earned him respect in the local community. Musicians and fans alike admired Daniel for his commitment to his craft. Music was Daniel's entire world. It was how he expressed his emotions, his frustrations, and his hopes. While Craig used charm and conversation to connect with people, Daniel used his guitar and lyrics. There was an intensity to his music that captivated audiences, even though Daniel himself shied away from the attention it brought. On stage, he could lose himself in his performance, but once the lights dimmed, he would retreat into himself, preferring the quiet solitude of his apartment to the chaos of the music scene. Despite their differences, Daniel and Craig crossed paths, and what followed was an unexpected friendship. At first glance, they seemed an unlikely pair. Craig, the extroverted life of the party, and Daniel, the introverted musician who avoided the limelight. But somehow, their contrasting personalities complemented each other. Craig admired Daniel, not just for his musical talent, but for his calm and grounded demeanor. While Craig's life was filled with ups and downs, Daniel seemed steady, unaffected by the pressures of the outside world. For Craig, who constantly battled his own insecurities and demons, Daniel represented something he longed for: peace. The friendship offered Craig an escape from his own chaotic world, and he found comfort in the simplicity of Daniel's life. They started spending more time together, sharing drinks at local bars, talking about art, music, and life. Craig enjoyed their conversations, which felt more honest and real than the superficial interactions he often had with others. Daniel, though quiet, was thoughtful and reflective. He had a way of seeing the world that intrigued Craig, who often felt like he was running on autopilot. For Daniel, Craig was an interesting companion. While Daniel preferred to keep his distance from people, there was something about Craig's energy that drew him in. Craig made things feel lighter, easier. He was fun to be around, and their shared love of art and creativity gave them plenty to talk about. Daniel appreciated the friendship because, in many ways, Craig was everything Daniel was not. Craig was bold, confident, and unafraid to take risks, qualities Daniel admired from afar but struggled to embody himself. But beneath the surface of their friendship, something else was brewing, something much more complicated than either of them could admit. The quiet streets of Austin, where creativity flourished, would soon become the backdrop for a tragedy no one could have anticipated. A tragedy born not from hatred, but from feelings too powerful to remain hidden. As time went on, Craig's admiration for Daniel began to take on a life of its own, evolving into something far more complex and confusing than a simple friendship. What started as a bond built on mutual respect and a shared love for art and music slowly shifted into a tangled web of emotions that Craig didn't know how to untangle. At first, it was easy for Craig to admire Daniel from afar. After all, Daniel had everything Craig wanted: a steady demeanor, a quiet confidence, and the ability to simply be at peace with himself. But as their friendship deepened, so did Craig's feelings for Daniel. At first, Craig wasn't entirely sure what those feelings were. He chalked it up to admiration and the kind of connection one feels toward a close friend. But as the weeks turned into months, those feelings began to grow, and with them, Craig's confusion. This wasn't just friendship. Craig found himself looking forward to every text from Daniel, every time they would hang out. He began to crave Daniel's attention in a way that went beyond what would be explained as a friendly affection. Craig wanted more, though he didn't quite know how to admit it, not to Daniel, not even to himself. In his head, Craig replayed every interaction with Daniel. He analyzed every smile, every joke, and every look, searching for some hidden meaning, some sign that Daniel might feel the same way. But deep down, Craig knew the truth. Daniel didn't feel the same. Daniel had always made it clear that he was straight. He talked about his past relationships with women, and he seemed completely comfortable around Craig, never once giving off any indication that he felt anything more than friendship. Still, Craig couldn't help himself. He kept holding out hope, clinging to the moments they shared as friends, hoping they might lead to something more. But that hope was misplaced, and it began to eat away at him. Every time Daniel mentioned a new woman in his life, or talked about someone he was interested in, it felt like a punch to the gut. Craig would sit there, nodding along, pretending to be supportive, but inside, his jealousy burned. The feelings he had tried to suppress were growing stronger by the day. What had once been a harmless crush had turned into an all-consuming obsession. Craig found himself thinking about Daniel constantly, wondering where he was, who he was with, and whether or not he was thinking about Craig. He would go over their conversations in his mind, replaying them again and again, trying to decode Daniel's words, desperate to find something, anything that might indicate Daniel saw him in a different light. But Daniel remained completely unaware of Craig's internal struggle. To Daniel, their friendship was just that, a friendship. He had no idea that Craig's feelings had taken such a dark turn. While Daniel was busy living his life, dating women and enjoying the social scene in Austin, Craig's feelings of jealousy and frustration were festering. Every time Daniel mentioned a new relationship, Craig's jealousy intensified. The thought of Daniel being with someone else, of giving his time and affection to another person, was unbearable for Craig. It felt like he was slowly being pushed to the sidelines of Daniel's life. Craig tried to keep his emotions in check. He told himself that he was overreacting, that these feelings would pass, but they didn't. The more he tried to suppress them, the stronger they became, until they threatened to consume him entirely. His growing attraction to Daniel began to affect their dynamic. Craig became more sensitive to the way Daniel interacted with him. He started to feel slighted when Daniel didn't respond to his texts quickly enough, or when Daniel cancelled plans to spend time with someone else. The casual nature of their friendship, which had once brought Craig comfort, now made him feel anxious and rejected. Despite his internal turmoil, Craig kept his feelings hidden from Daniel. He feared that if he confessed how he really felt, it would destroy their friendship. Craig knew that Daniel didn't feel the same way, and the idea of Daniel pulling away from him was terrifying. So, he said nothing, pretending that everything was fine while silently enduring the pain of unrequited love. But it was becoming harder and harder for Craig to maintain the facade. Craig's obsession with Daniel began to take over his life. He couldn't focus on his work, couldn't enjoy the things that used to make him happy. Everything he did was colored by his feelings for Daniel. It wasn't just about wanting to be with Daniel. It was about the life Craig imagined they could have together. In his mind, Craig had built up a fantasy in which Daniel would realize that they were meant to be together, that they were more than just friends. But that fantasy was far from reality. Daniel continued to live his life, blissfully unaware of the emotional storm brewing inside Craig, and the more distant Daniel seemed, the more desperate Craig became. The jealousy Craig felt when Daniel talked about other women was overwhelming. It gnawed at him, making him feel inadequate, rejected, and invisible. Craig started to fixate on small moments, looking for any sign that Daniel might feel something more. He would overanalyze the way Daniel smiled at him, or the way Daniel's hand might brush against his during a conversation. But no matter how much Craig wanted to believe that there was something deeper between them, the truth was inescapable. Daniel didn't see him that way, and that realization was like a knife twisting in Craig's heart. As time went on, Craig's frustration grew. He felt trapped by his own feelings, unable to express them and unable to move on. His friendship with Daniel, which had once been a source of happiness, was now a constant reminder of what he couldn't have. Craig's emotions were spiraling out of control, and he didn't know how to stop them. What had started as admiration had turned into obsession. Craig's jealousy, his unreciprocated love, and his growing frustration were pushing him to the edge. The tension between him and Daniel, though unspoken, was becoming palpable. Someone had to give, and deep down, Craig knew that their friendship couldn't continue like this. The feelings he had tried so hard to hide were starting to surface, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The events of that fateful night in 2015 would forever be etched in the minds of those who knew Craig Kingsley and Daniel Spencer. What started as an ordinary evening quickly spiraled into chaos and violence, leaving one man dead and the other in handcuffs. It was a humid night in Austin, Texas, the kind of night that wraps the city in a heavy, electric energy. The air was thick, almost palpable, with the sounds of laughter and distant music spilling from the nearby bars and clubs. Craig and Daniel had planned to hang out, just like they had done countless times before, unwinding with drinks and the camaraderie that had brought them together. They were at Daniel's house, a cozy space filled with instruments and music posters, sharing a few beers and discussing everything from art to their dreams for the future. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the mood shifted. The tension that had been simmering between the two men for months finally reached a boiling point. Subtle glances, lingering touches, and unspoken words hung heavily in the air, creating a pressure cooker of emotions that neither of them could ignore any longer. According to Craig, the turning point came when Daniel made a comment that he interpreted as a come-on, a teasing remark that ignited a firestorm of jealousy and confusion within him. Craig would later tell police that Daniel had made an unwanted advance, an act that sent him spiraling into a fit of rage. The once warm and friendly atmosphere became charged with hostility as Craig's emotions spiraled out of control. The details of that night are murky, clouded by the fog of adrenaline and anger. What exactly transpired in those tense moments remains unclear, but one thing is certain: a violent argument erupted between the two men. Voices were raised, insults exchanged, and the air crackled with an intensity that foreshadowed the horrors to come. In the heat of the moment, Craig grabbed a knife from Daniel's kitchen, a decision that would alter the course of both of their lives forever. In an act of blind rage, Craig stabbed Daniel multiple times. The ferocity of the attack was brutal. Daniel, taken by surprise, had little chance to defend himself. As the knife pierced his skin, he fell to the ground. Shock and disbelief etched across his face. Blood pooled around him, staining the floor as Craig stood over him, overwhelmed by a rush of emotions. Fear, guilt, and an indescribable horror at what he had just done. In a panicked daze, Craig fled the scene, leaving Daniel to die alone in his own home. The aftermath was nothing short of horrific. Daniel's lifeless body was discovered the next morning by a concerned neighbor who hadn't heard from him. When police arrived, they found Daniel on the floor, his body riddled with stab wounds, each telling a story of a friendship twisted into a tragic end. Craig was nowhere to be found, his whereabouts a mystery that would leave investigators searching for answers. As news of the brutal stabbing spread through the community, shockwaves reverberated through the tight-knit circles of Austin's artistic scene. Friends and acquaintances struggled to comprehend how two men who had shared laughter and camaraderie could end up in such a tragic confrontation. In the wake of that fateful night, the reality of Craig and Daniel's once promising lives shattered, leaving only questions and haunting echoes of what had been. The scene was set for a chilling exploration of desire, jealousy, and the catastrophic consequences of unspoken feelings, a narrative that would unfold in the days to come as the investigation deepened. When the police began investigating the crime, it didn't take them long to connect the dots. Craig's sudden disappearance, the bloodstains left behind, and the rocky relationship between the two men all pointed to one thing: Craig was their prime suspect. Craig was eventually found hours later, wandering the streets of Austin, seemingly in shock and disoriented. His clothes were stained with blood, and his demeanor was erratic. When questioned by the police, he didn't deny what had happened. In fact, he admitted to the stabbing almost as if confessing to a crime he felt compelled to reveal. However, his story raised more questions than answers. Craig claimed that Daniel had made unwanted sexual advances, asserting that their confrontation stemmed from a moment of self-defense. He painted himself as the victim in this tragic narrative, suggesting that he had acted out of fear for his safety. But as detectives examined the crime scene, the evidence told a different story. Blood spatter patterns indicated a violent struggle, and the severity of Daniel's injuries suggested a premeditated attack rather than a defensive reaction. Investigators began to dig deeper into Craig's past, uncovering the hidden obsession he had harbored for Daniel. Friends and acquaintances came forward, describing Craig's infatuation with Daniel, an infatuation that had been growing for months. They recalled instances where Craig would talk about Daniel with an intensity that bordered on fixation, revealing a desire that he had never openly acknowledged. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that this was no act of self-defense. This was a crime of passion, driven by jealousy, unfulfilled longing, and a dangerous obsession that had spiraled out of control. The deeper authorities probed, the more sinister the circumstances surrounding Daniel's death appeared, painting a picture of a friendship that had turned fatally toxic. When Craig's trial began, the courtroom was packed with journalists, friends, and family members of both men. The trial was emotionally charged, with both sides presenting compelling arguments. The prosecution painted Craig as a man consumed by his unreciprocated feelings for Daniel. They argued that the murder was premeditated, fueled by Craig's growing jealousy and frustration over Daniel's rejection. They pointed to the brutality of the stabbing, the multiple wounds inflicted on Daniel, as evidence that this was a crime of rage, not self-defense. Witnesses testified about the close relationship between the two men and how it had slowly deteriorated over time as Craig's feelings became more intense. They spoke of Craig's growing obsession with Daniel and how he had become increasingly possessive and paranoid in the months leading up to the murder. In the end, the jury was not swayed by Craig's claims of self-defense. They found him guilty of second-degree murder. Craig Kingsley was sentenced to 25 years in prison, leaving behind a trail of broken lives and shattered friendships. The murder of Daniel Spencer left the Austin community reeling in disbelief and sorrow. Those who knew him described Daniel as a kind, gentle soul who had a profound passion for music and life itself. He was the kind of person who could light up a room with his presence, known for his warm smile and infectious laughter. Daniel's death was not just a personal tragedy for his family and friends. It was a profound loss for the entire community. Musicians who had shared stages with him mourned the loss of a talent that had so much more to give, while friends reminisced about the joyous moments they had spent together, now overshadowed by the horror of his untimely demise. In stark contrast, Craig Kingsley found himself at the center of a nightmare of his own making. The consequences of his actions weighed heavily on him, casting a dark shadow over his once promising future. His obsession with Daniel, combined with his inability to accept rejection and a growing sense of frustration, led him down a dark and dangerous path. What began as a friendship filled with potential had spiraled into a tragic confrontation fueled by unresolved emotions and repressed desires. Craig's internal struggles manifested in a moment of violence that would forever alter the course of his life. This case serves as a stark reminder of the dangers associated with unaddressed mental health issues, particularly when they intersect with repressed desires and emotional turmoil. It highlights how jealousy and obsession, if left unchecked, can culminate in devastating consequences, not just for the individuals directly involved, but for families and communities as a whole. As the community grapples with the loss of Daniel Spencer, it is crucial to acknowledge the lessons learned from this tragedy and to foster conversations around mental health, emotional well-being, and the importance of addressing feelings before they lead to irrevocable harm. As we close the chapter on this tragic story, we are left with more questions than answers. What drives someone to commit such a heinous act? How can repressed emotions turn so dark, leading to violence and death? The story of Craig Kingsley and Daniel Spencer serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the importance of addressing our emotions, of seeking help when we need it, and of the devastating consequences that can arise when we don't. If you're interested in hearing more real-life crime stories, be sure to check out our other videos on similar chilling cases. Each story is a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones we keep hidden inside.